Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Dana Show. I'm your host, Dana Kaplan. From the beginning, my vision has been to highlight people whose lives inspire and uplift us. And from my very first episode, there was one person I dreamt of bringing on the show. My next guest, Jonathan Pollard. Jonathan is one of the most controversial and influential figures of our time. To some, he represents betrayal. To many, he represents loyalty, sacrifice, and the unshakable bond between the Jewish people and the state of Israel. For me, his story is personal. My late father, Izzy Kaplan, poured his heart into Jonathan's cause. His name was spoken often in our home, and that connection has stayed with me all my life. Now, for my 50th episode, I have the honor of giving this generation the chance to hear Jonathan's story directly in his own words, not through headlines or history books, but face to face. Without further ado, Jonathan Pollard. First of all, holy crap, I can't believe I'm sitting next to you.
Are we on?
Well, it's recording, but we don't have to start yet.
Okay.
This is just, before we even get started, I want to say that when I started the podcast, my first episode, I had in the back of my head that I would have you on for my 50th episode. And this is my 50th episode.
Okay.
And here
Well,
you
be
are.
careful what you dream for.
Yeah. So far, I don't regret it.
Okay. All right.
Well, so usually before I start the show, I mention the hostages. I know you have a little bit of issue with mentioning the hostages.
No.
I feel like I carry them in my heart every day because first of all, my son has a friend who's a hostage still. And I feel like I have to bring them up. Every time I do something positive, I have to remember that there's still people who are suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So I start with that. And on that note, I wrote an introduction for you, if you would allow me to read it. This is such an important event, so I feel like I have to say something. There are some names in Jewish history that move beyond the person, names that symbolize sacrifice, loyalty, and unshakable love for Eretz Yisrael. Jonathan Pollard is one of those names. For over 30 years, Jonathan was incarcerated in an American prison after being accused and convicted of passing classified U.S. intelligence to Israel. His story wasn't just about one man. It became a modern-day Dreyfus affair, a symbol of betrayal and loyalty, of justice and injustice, and how one Jew's fate could expose the fragile bond between Israel and the United States. For me, this story has always been very close. My late father, Izzy Kaplan, devoted himself completely to Jonathan's freedom. He didn't just follow the headlines. He worked, he organized, he poured his heart into your case. At one point, he even tried to create a documentary with filmmaker Simcha Jacobovicki to bring Jonathan's story to the world, a project he invested his whole soul in, even though it never came to fruition. And my sister, too, long before there was internet, and which made organizing things possible, stood outside of supermarkets, schools, high schools, universities, Jewish organizations, collecting signature for your release. She stayed in contact with your family, with Carol, and even received a letter from you while you were in prison. Jonathan's name wasn't just in the news. It was alive, present, and very much part of our lives. And so today it is with deep gratitude, reverence, and emotion that I welcome you, not just as a guest, but as a symbolic figure whose story is forever etched into the destiny of our people. Thank you so much for being here. I'm getting so emotional.
Oh, my pleasure. I can't let this moment pass without commenting on your father. Now I know who your father was. He was somebody that loomed large in my wife, Esther Shalom, in her life. And I can't imagine Esther accomplishing a fraction of what she did globally without the help of your father. He was one of the most decent human beings I've ever had the pleasure to know remotely. But I can't think of a conversation I had with Esther when she lived in Toronto that he wasn't mentioned.
Really?
Yeah, I can't think of one. And she was fiercely loyal to him. I know that there was a lot of, back and forth over the organization and the building itself and everything else. And she said that if Izzy wasn't in charge of everything, the whole operation was going to just fail. Because she said he is this organization. And I'm very proud to meet you. And if I can pass along a thank you through you to Shemayim for your father. It's, last night or in the early part of the afternoon, I had a meeting, a very important meeting with an MK, Tzvi Sukkot of the Religious Zionist Party. And we were talking about the drone threat down along the border and how we could maybe build a drone defense line quickly to defend the border. And there was a guy translating for me because Tzvi doesn't speak English, and it's a long story, don't speak Ivrit, Hebrew.
Eddie?
You don't want me saying what I know. I kind of know Army,
Okay.
and it's really not nice.
Okay.
And
Army jargon.
my wife,
Okay.
Rivka, has threatened everything, including decapitation if I start talking. I corrupted my daughters. They hadn't heard half the words that I came out with when I was angry over something. And suddenly I looked at the guy translating, and Daniel Winston, and he said, my mother and father were always very close to you. And I said, who were your mother and father? And when I found out, I was floored. They were the mainstays of our effort in the United States. Esther knew them very well. My parents knew them very well. Manny Winston and Gail Winston. If we didn't have them, they would have had to have been created. Fantastic people. They were kind of like the equivalent of your dad in the United States for us.
How does that make you feel, Jonathan? When you see all these people that were rallying for you, how does that make you feel?
Thankful.
Did you feel it while you were there? Did you know it was going on while you were there?
Esther tried very hard to keep me abreast of developments, maybe too much. I came out, like a baby that comes out fully aware of his surroundings. She gave me, over the course of 30 years, I have 10,000 books, which are in Modi'in now. In Maledumim in storage, which we have to move into our house one of these days. And she sent me a box of newspapers and everything else every week. So I knew
there was no internet.
No internet. So I knew what was going on. And, you have to have faith in God, and you have to have faith in your wife, especially that she knows what she's doing. And Esther clearly did. The hardest part, after I was interrogated, which left me, now I'm 100% disabled. After that and after my sentencing.
Where there was a lot of violence?
Yeah, my back was broken in 4 places. Every joint in my body was broken.
Why?
First of all, they wanted to know my team, who my team was, and what was the escape plan. And we have a rule, you wait 30 days to let people get out. And I had lost track of time. I was naked, covered with a bag somewhere. I didn't know where I was. Yeah, it was cold. It was up in the mountains. I guess it was either West Virginia or Pennsylvania. I'm not sure. And so I just said, okay, that's it. I don't know what time it is. So I just keep my mouth shut. But the two things they wanted, one was the names and the escape route of my team members, and the other was a list of pretty much every prominent American Jewish leader. And they just wanted me to put a tick next to the box associated with their name, implicating them in my operations. And I knew very quickly that this was a decapitation effort on somebody's part. And I was raised by my parents not to moser another Jew, except if it's in a kosher bet din. And my father emphasized the kashrut nature of the bet din. And so I couldn't say anything, except, I said horrible things, stupid things in retrospect, like when I was getting hit. And I told the interrogator, my mother hit me harder than that. He that showed me rather quickly that I was mistaken. I didn't know who had done it to me. I really didn't. And my lawyers, after 6 weeks, I was raped also almost every day for 6 weeks.
My face, mirror.
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting because I talk to religious women's groups composed of women from the age of 18 to 90 who have been sexually abused usually by a relative. And they open up to me because I understand what they must have gone through. And they're shocked at first that it could happen to a man, and then they understand that they have somebody to talk to.
Who did it?
Well, I didn't know until 9/11. And a Navy delegation came to see me. I knew they were military, but I didn't know who they were. I could see the boots. So the Navy officers looked at me and said, the 11 of your brother officers, Navy officers. So I knew they were 11. I knew they were Navy. I knew they were officers. All died in 9/11 at the Pentagon. They were in the office that the airplane hit head on, and there was nothing left of them. Vaporized, as if they had never lived. And so I'm wondering, why am I here? So they said, we thought, and they pushed their tape recorder forward and they were videotaping it. And they said, we thought you'd like to give words of consolation to their wives and children. And God kept my mouth shut because I realized they wanted me to say something very bad and there wouldn't be any context. And it would just be a stream of profanity. And I was quiet until I gathered my thoughts. And then I said, okay, yes, I have something, words of consolation for their wives and children. We have an expression in Hebrew, Baruch Dayan Hamet. And I thank God for having the wisdom to remember that at the time. And yeah, it was ironic, but it was appropriate. And when we landed in Israel, when Esther and I landed, Alei Shalom and I landed, she actually sat across my lap and held my hand in her head, my head in her hands. And she said, "It's over. No vengeance." She said, "Remember what your father told you. A person going down the road to vengeance has to be prepared to dig 2 graves." And she said, God did the punishment. You said it yourself, Baruch Dayan Emet. Do you remember? Yeah, she was always a teacher. And with a finger. And I said, yes, I remember. So she said, is it over? And I said, yes, it's over.
Can we go back to the beginning, to your childhood, to your background? How was Judaism presented to you? Zionism presented to you? What was your connection?
Zionism was always a very important part of our family. And 2 of my uncles were...
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Galveston, Texas.
Okay.
And you don't want to hear my accent. My current wife, Rivka, was born and raised in Birmingham, England. I don't understand a word of it. She says it's a very strange accent. And so one day I said to her, sweetie, let me show you how I used to talk when I grew up. And I let her into East Texas twang. And she just looked at me for a while and said, "My Lord, you've dropped about 100 IQ points right now." And I said, "Well, that's the way we roll in Texas." No. So I grew up in Texas. Our family in Galveston. My father was a doctor there. I had an uncle who was a doctor there. And I was raised on a couple of stories. I have an uncle who was a lone survivor of our German family in Cologne. And he was on a voyage of the damned. And he had to jump ship off Trinidad. And he was sponsored by none other than Senator Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he became the kind of the chief bombardiers for the 8th Air Force in Europe because he knew German cities backwards and forwards. And I asked him once, how is it that the cathedral, the Dom in Cologne survived? I mean, amidst a sea of rubble, how did it survive? He said, "I don't know. I tried to hit that damn building for 4 years and I just couldn't hit it. For some reason, the bombers just couldn't hit it." At any rate, so my young life was infused with love of Israel. I mean, when I went to Shul, we only had a Reform temple in Galveston. It was a very Yekka, very German place. But there was the Israeli flag. And my uncle always pointed it out, and he brought me over as a boy, and he said, "Hold this flag." He said, "Now kiss the flag." He said, this is your loyalty. This is where your loyalty is." And I looked at him and I said, "What about the Lone Star of Texas?" He said, "No, that's loyal also, but this is more loyal. You'll be more loyal to this." So, as I said, two of my uncles were extensively involved with providing munitions, one to the Irgun and the other one to Haganah. And they didn't talk.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the ideological disagreements extended to holidays, weddings, funerals. They just didn't talk. They were both generals, and as well as my father. So, that comes with some special weird territory also. My father did, I don't know what. Every summer he used to disappear for about a month and a half, sometimes 2 months. And
you don't know where he went?
I knew he went to a place called Nessiona.
Do you know where that is now?
Now I know what that is. No, when I went to get a COVID shot there, because I couldn't take the regular COVID shots because my wife, Esther Alea Shalom, she had zero immunity.
Oh.
And if you take the mRNA shots, you're a spreader. So they said you mustn't take this vaccine or whatever it was. And so, okay, Nessiona has a vaccine called BriLife. And they gave me a flag, and, I was going to be the guinea pig, I guess. It was a conventional vaccine. And suddenly the director looked at me and said, "Whoa, wait a second. Your wife is dying of cancer." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You can't take it's a live vaccine." He said, "You'll kill her. So I'm sorry." So, okay. I mean, I did my best. So I looked at him and I said, "Were you here when my dad was here?" And he just kind of swiveled his eyes over and he said, "Yes." I said, "What was he doing here?" Because my father's specialty was biological warfare. It was bugs and germs. And he said, "You don't know? Your dad never told you?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, I guess he had a reason for that. Nice meeting you."
And he didn't reveal. I have
no idea what he did, but it was for our people and for the state of Israel. So I'm satisfied with that.
So it's genetic.
So it's the whole family. So I grew up most of my young life in Galveston, and then my father took a position at the University of Notre Dame, first Jewish professor at this Jesuit college in South Bend, Indiana, which is about 90 miles east of Chicago. And so the latter part of my young life was spent there. Under pretty trying conditions. Anti-Semitism was pretty bad there. So it was fighting constantly for me. It was a great Jewish community. But Vietnam was in motion at the time, and I was torn whether to go to Vietnam or go to Israel. And I preferred to go to Israel. But my father was very strict about doing your civic duty. He had been in Vietnam twice. My brother was twice there, so I was going. And we had an agreement that after everything was over, I could go to Israel. And I could go after college. I could go with something. I was going to be an engineer and a naval architect, so I could do something meaningful here. Okay, so I went to university at Stanford. Almost made it to Vietnam, but the war ended mid-Pacific, so I came back and asked my mother, you don't ask your father this, you ask Ima, what do I do now? You know, I have years that I owe the Navy, but what do I do? I don't know. We were in reserve, like Milium. So my mother said, oh, you're going to law school. I said, I never applied. And she said, I did.
Oh.
She said, you know, you remember, I'm talking on a payphone with like 400, 500 guys behind me with their recorder, you know, waiting to come. And as she said, you remember I told you you had three choices. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, or a plumber. I said, Ma, where did you come up with this story about being a plumber? She said, the first time you were working on the plumbing and you were bent down and I saw the crack of your ass. And she said, I knew immediately you had what it took to be a plumber. And I just said, Mom, come on now, you know, please, that's it. She said, yeah, and they make a pretty good living also. You had to know my mother. She was one of the most, I grew up in a household of strong women, with my sister, of course, and my mother. And
how many siblings did you have altogether?
Two other, with my brother and my sister. And so, as I said, I grew up in a household of very strong women. And I was shocked, just parenthetically, I was shocked when I came to Israel and found out how misogynistic it was here.
Yeah.
I don't like the way certain people talk down to my wife. Looking at me, she asks a question and they look at me to answer. And, you know, I have to say, hey, she asked the question. And I don't like the responses I get in that case.
Yeah. It's getting better, though.
Well,
you know, when I first moved here, it was a lot worse. A lot worse.
Well, this was a major problem for Esther because as a woman, she had a problem with credibility because, you know, people were always telling her, why don't you just stay in the kitchen and let the big boys take care of your husband? And thank God she dismissed that advice with the contempt it deserved. So college, law school, I finished 1 year. I was bored to tears. I couldn't stand it. And then I was reactivated and went to MIT for naval architecture, which I got my degree there. And then I thought I was going to design ships. I designed a couple of ships. And then I ended up in New York with a special team, eliminating threats. And then I was in Europe quite a bit, doing the same thing. And then came back to the United States and I was involved in all kinds of things for the Navy, including I was on the committee for the U.S.-Israel Intelligence Exchange Agreement. And that's where I saw trouble because the U.S. wasn't abiding by the agreement. We were shortchanging Israel. There had been, I found out, an undeclared intelligence embargo because of our attack on the Iraqi nuclear reactor.
So that's what I wanted to ask you. Did this whole scandal come about out of your initiative or out of Israel's?
No, my initiative.
You saw things that were shady and you contacted Israel?
Yeah, it was beyond shady. I guess you could say, technically I was a walk-in. I had always wanted to go to Israel to make Aliyah.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, I'll learn the tricks of the trade here, and then I'll bring something truly useful back to Israel. And my father advised me not to do that. He said, you will be confronted with problems in the intelligence work you do that will cause you to have a conflict of interest. And he said, I know you, and I know where the chips will fall. He said, just go now. And being pig-headed young man, what did my father know? There's a great expression by Mark Twain. He said, when I was 15 years old, I thought my father was an absolute dunce. But when I turned 20, I was amazed at how intelligent he had become. And that's the same thing that happened to me. I never thought he was a dunce. I just thought he was out of touch with modernity. Okay, so I crossed the line.
So when you contacted Israel and told them that there was this...
They knew it.
They knew something was incorrect.
They knew that there was something horribly remiss. It was going on. They knew it. I got into a lot of one-sided arguments with my Israeli counterparts who, told me flat out, why are you lying to us? Why are you withholding information from us? Look, these are the terms of reference. This is what we're supposed to talk about. And on one occasion, I, went all the way up the chain and finally got to the office of the Secretary of Defense. And the answer I got to my question of why aren't we giving them this particular information, the answer was, we'll let them lose a few airplanes and they'll figure it out. Look, my boss had an ashtray on his desk. It said Auschwitz on it.
I Vezmir.
Yeah, and I lost everybody except this one guy in the Churban Europa. And I couldn't say anything because, as strange as this may be, no one knew I was Jewish.
Really?
No one. In fact, when I was arrested, people, from what I understand, were more shocked at the fact that I was a Jew than the fact that I was a spy. Horrified. Horrified would be a better term.
Wow.
Yeah. Look, my first assignment when I came in, I drew the short straw, so I had to do an analysis of the Liberty incident. So I had all source information. I did what I was trained to do, and I came up with the conclusion that it was a tragic mistake. Period. It was a mistake. And the naval officer that was conducting the exam looked at me and he said, whose side are you on? And I said, well, I'm on the side of truth. Wherever that goes, I'm an intelligence officer. He said, no. I'm going to have to keep my eye on you.
They had a suspicion.
Well, no, they just had a suspicion that I wasn't with the program. They still didn't know I was Jewish. I mean, I go to lunch. Everybody's eating ham and cheese sandwiches and I'm having vegetables. So what's the matter with you? And I said, I'm a vegetarian. Okay, they accepted that.
Did you know the risk of what you were doing while you were doing it? Did you realize what could happen if you were found out?
Let me give you an answer to that. There are two answers. When I was in Paris at the safe house, Rafi Eitan, my boss, I asked him, what's my code name? And he said, Danny Cohen. I said, Danny Cohen? Well, he might have all been, Jaime Lipschitz. I mean, well, why'd you name me Danny Cohen? And he said, well, we had an Ellie Cohen in Damascus, and we now have a Danny Cohen in Washington. And I said, that's bad karma. He said, we recognize how dangerous it is for you in Washington now. And in the event you're caught, you're probably going to die. Flat out. So he said, I give you my word that we'll extract you. You won't end up like Ellie Cohen at the end of a rope. And I understood how serious it was because I knew the community that I worked in, and they were viciously anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, if you can make a distinction. So in that regard, yeah, I knew that what the ultimate risk was.
And yet you still
Well, it came to a head the last time I was in Israel, and I was in counterintelligence, so I kind of knew that the walls were closing in for some reason. I didn't know at the time that there was a CIA spy in the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. And unfortunately, my name was bandied around quite a bit by people who should have known better here. So what they knew was that there was an Israeli spy somewhere in naval intelligence. Okay. So I could see things were being done to look for somebody. So when I came to Israel for the last time and I met Rafi, I said to him, look, they're closing in. I don't know what they know, but it's not good. And I'd like to just stay here. I'll resign, send in my resignation from Europe, and, that's it. And he said, I'm going to tell you now the same thing that was told to Ellie Cohen when he asked to stay, because he felt the walls closing in. You have to make a decision right now whether your life is more important than the life of Israel and her people. So I said, why? And he read me into a program about a war on the Golan that could be started if a certain Russian weapon system was delivered. That was what the peace they were waiting for war. The Syrians, standing start war, to just overrun the Golan and kill everybody. Even if they would lost the war, it would have been a great victory in their eyes. So I thought about this and I said, so I have to determine which way this equipment is going when it passes the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus. It could either go to Libya or Syria, right? Left or right. And he said, yeah. So he said, you make the decision now. He said, you could very well end up getting caught, and we know what will happen to you. You know what will happen to you, and it won't be pretty.
Did they tell you they were good? You said that they would have extracted you, right?
Yeah.
But that's not really what happened in the end.
No, because what happened was when, at one point, something just told me was wrong. You have to go with your gut in that profession. And so I came in late one night, put a ladder up, pushed the false ceiling up, and there's a camera over my desk.
Okay.
So the alarm bells went off, and my left side of the brain said run, and the right said no, you haven't gotten the information yet. The next day, I got the information. And later that night, I was arrested.
Did you manage to hand it over to the Israelis?
So what happened was...
How did you send information back then? There was no internet.
That's I can get into that. It was another interesting aspect.
Okay.
Simpler than you would think.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. This is before all the gadgetry.
Right.
No. So I realized that there were some Israelis in town who did not have diplomatic immunity that had come to visit me. So Colonel Aviam Sella, now Tataluf Sella, who was and is and forever in my mind a Gibor Yisrael, more important to the country than I ever would have been. So my objective was twofold: to get the information out to them, to my people, and to rescue him, to get him out of the country. So I asked to make a phone call. They're listening to everything, right? I had a packet of cigarettes with a red tip, a cyanide, and I just, Jews don't commit suicide. We buy retail instead. That's just the fact of life. I'm sorry. So I contacted my wife at the time, and who was also part of the operation, and I gave her a code word, and she said, "That's it." I said, "Yeah, that's it. Bye." So she dodged the FBI, did what she was told to do, and got rid of them, got to the people.
She was also arrested, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah. And she was supposed to go with them, and she didn't. This is why you never have real husbands and wives in teams like this, because the loyalty supersedes common sense. Okay. So, make a long story short, I knew the drill, that they would leave me free to see what would happen, because I had conducted a lot of operations like this myself. And I made my first of 2 calls with a secure phone that was hidden, landline. We didn't have cell phones.
Do you remember every single detail?
Everything, more than I really wish.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it hard for you to talk about it?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No. And I said, I confessed to being a Pakistani spy. That was what I was supposed to do. I passed a polygraph. I had pictures in the house of me supposedly in Islamabad. I wasn't. I had Pakistani money. I had pictures with various Pakistani generals, very neatly kind of juxtaposed. And so they didn't know what they had. So I told the voice at the other end of the line, I'm a spy, a Pakistani spy. I've confessed. I passed the polygraph. They've got a Paki. And the voice said, Rafi never organized an extraction. And, I didn't know what to say. So I said, so what are my orders? He said, you come to the embassy. I said, this is insane. I just confessed to being a Pakistani spy. You're going to wreck the whole thing. He said, those are your orders. And the next day, when I called for my final set of orders, they repeated it. I objected strenuously, and they hung up. So when I finally got to the embassy, they were all waiting at the Pakistani embassy. They were horrified when I took a right instead of a left, which was ironic in terms of the information I was going to pass on. So everything was fine. I was in the embassy. I was in the garage in the embassy, and the chief of security came out and said, Jerusalem has ordered you to step outside the embassy and come in the front door. And I looked up the driveway, and there were hundreds of agents with guns out. And I said, you know what's going to happen to me? He said, those are your orders. I said, look, take my wife in. She was very sick. Take my wife in and shoot me. Just say that you thought I was a terrorist. And I saw everybody moving away from me at that point. And I desperately wanted him to shoot me, because I knew what was going to happen. And I really didn't want to go through that, because I had conducted things like that myself in Beirut.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I knew how bad could be. So he said, no, my orders are to just send you out now. So I got in the car with my ex-wife, and he held the door, and he said, I need your last report. I'm a good soldier. So I said, it's right. He said, are you sure about that? I said, it's Libya. It's to the right. He said, okay, Hatzlacha. And then it was 30 years of a descent, just an unbroken descent into hell. I knew I was worse than I actually thought with the interrogation. And then after my sentencing, actually, at the sentencing, it was pretty interesting because the U.S. attorney was kind enough to reveal to everybody in open court that I was the Israeli intelligence officer that put together the October 1985 airstrike on Tunis to kill Arafat. And I looked, 90 people were killed. These are force 17 people or whatever they are, his bodyguard. And I just looked up at the guy and I said, thanks for putting a big effing bullseye on my back. He said, you're never getting out of prison, so it doesn't matter. So the judge asked me to stand up. He said, do you have any remorse at all for the people you killed? I said, yes, Your Honor, that there wasn't one more. He said, indeed. Sit down. Many years later, one of the prosecutors came to see me in prison. And Esther Shalom was there, my lawyers were there, and he had come to apologize for what happened to me. And he put his hand out, and I refused to shake it. So Esther, being a proper Anglo-Canadian, shoved my hand forward and said, be a gentleman. Yeah, okay. Shook his hand. And he said, let me take you back to that day in court. Where was your head when you made that incredible statement that you were sorry that there wasn't one more? I said, where was my head? It was in Tunis. We missed Arafat. Somebody talked here to save him. And I hope before my time comes that I find out who it is. And I have the honor and privilege to send him straight to hell with one right between the eyes, because that man is a traitor. So he said, Tunis. I said, yeah. He said, well, let me tell you where the judge's mind was. And the judge's mind was in the basement of the Lefortovo prison in Moscow. You know where that is? I said, yeah, it's KGB headquarters. I know where that is. People think it's on Dzerzhinsky, but it isn't. It's in the Lefortovo prison. And he said the judge was told in chambers how General Igor Trechikov, a.k.a. Tricycle, was fed feet first alive into a furnace in front of his parents, his wife, his children, everybody, for having been a CIA spy. I said, I didn't have anything to do with that. He said, we know now. It was Aldrich Ames. He's just been caught. He confessed. He was ordered by the 5th Directorate to set you up as the culprit for, to be what he was doing, to cover for what he was doing. And I said, yeah, and? He said, well, he went in to see the judge an hour before you were sentenced and described that scene and said that as the head of counterintelligence for Eastern Europe for the CIA, I was the one responsible for the then ongoing slaughter of the CIA and MI6 networks in Russia. So he said, when you told the judge you were just sorry that there wasn't one more, you thought Arafat. He didn't. He thought Trechikov. He said, did you notice how many security agents, heavily armed security agents, were in the court that day? I said, yeah, it seemed a bit excessive. He said, well, there were many members of the CIA Operations Directorate, the field guys, who had volunteered to come in and cap me in court, shoot me right in court.
Wow.
So that's what I said. I said, wow. I said, I didn't do this. He said, we know now. You didn't have, he said, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Dennis D. Cancini, wrote a letter signed by everyone. It was bipartisan, to Clinton saying, you got the wrong guy. Let him go home. And Clinton's letter, which we have in our archive, basically said, yeah, we know now, but he's too much of an important bargaining chip with Israel. So, I mean, that's in black and white. The other problem I had was that I was deeply involved with Iran-Contra. Uh-huh. And it's a little bit before your time, but it was very controversial. And they knew I was involved because back in the day, you used a typewriter. And I had bought a new ribbon. And I had to write, excuse me, I had to write a policy paper for the Israelis on what air defense equipment was available on the international black market to defend Karg Island from Iraqi airstrikes. It was recovered. And they got this because it was a fresh ribbon. And so they suddenly realized that I knew too much.
Let's talk about for a second your sentencing. Well, I want to ask you something. Did you feel like you were abandoned by Israel at that time?
Not when I was sentenced.
No?
No. When I took my plea, what happened was I was quiet, didn't say anything. Came back, torn to pieces. Came hobbling into court, a security court, when my lawyers found me. And I went to sit down, and the judge said I didn't give me permission to sit down, stand up, Lieutenant. So I stood up. My ankles were completely broken. I mean, they were twisted broken. And so I stood up on, I don't know what I stood up on. And I had my hands on the chair, and he said, brace, which meant you have to come to attention. He said, I'll be back. I have some important work to do. You don't move. An hour later, and some change, he came back wiping his mouth. And he said, I understand, Lieutenant, that you slipped in the shower. Is that correct? I mean, my brains are hanging out. You know, you think this is a naturally occurring nose? No, it isn't. It's the result of an imbalance between my muscles and my mouth. I said, no, Your Honor, that's incorrect. He said, really? And I said, yeah, I slipped twice. He said, well, you're a smart boy. You just keep that story, or else I'll never see you in this court again.
Why? Why was he taking that side?
He hated Jews, and he hated Israel. They got the right guy for this, my persecution. They got the right guy. So,
wait, you obviously felt that you were
Wait, just a second. So what happened shortly thereafter, I'm called to the Department of Justice. Funny name, but called to the Department of Justice. I'm sitting there handcuffed to the chair. My legs are cuffed to the floor, shackled to the floor. My lawyer is there sleeping. He's Lebanese, sleeping. Yeah, that's what the
Did you appoint him?
No, the Israelis did.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
You know, that they just made damn sure that I was not going to ever leave prison. So the U.S. attorney came in with a little box. They had just come back from Israel, and he put the box down in front of me, and he said, you want to see what your brothers gave us? I said, not especially. So with gloves, he took out some documents that I recognized that had my fingerprints on them. And he said, you see, you owe nothing to them. Look what they did. He said, I'm not going to give you a plea agreement now. We're going to go straight to the death penalty. I said, okay. And as he was leaving, I said, excuse me. He turned around, smiling at me. I said, do you think you got everything? And the smile left his face. I said, you bring me something that doesn't require me to inform on anybody that I take personal responsibility for, and you protect my wife. She didn't, you got me. And we'll talk. So a few months later, I'm in court to take my plea. And I was given my plea agreement to sign, and I said, wait a second. What is this red and blue? What are the lines on here? The blue I knew was American because I'd been involved in things like this. It had not a signature, but what do you call it? It was just the initials, AS. I knew that was Avram Sofer, the chief legal counsel of the State Department, Foreign Office. But I didn't know who the red signature was. That was Israel. That's the other party. And I was no longer a bona fide Israeli agent. I was a renegade. And I was no longer involved in a bona fide, authorized, government-approved operation, but it was a off-the-records operation that had not been authorized, not approved. And I looked at this. I said, I can't sign this. This is a lie. I'd be perjuring myself. And I looked at my lawyer and I said, I'm an orphan. You understand what that means? So my lawyer said, look at your wife. And she was in a wheelchair, doubled over, bleeding through the rear end. He said, you look at her. You know they're not giving her any medication right now. I said, yeah, I know, I heard. He said, well, you don't sign this. You will be signing her death warrant.
Oh, my God.
So he said, you make the call. So when they pulled her over in a wheelchair to sign, she wouldn't sign. So I forced the signature. And everybody in the court saw it. She was screaming at me, don't, they're going to kill us anyway. So I went before the judge, who was laughing about the whole thing. He said, do you take this plea of your own free will? I said, you just saw what happened. You saw that this plea agreement has been changed. It's a lie. I'd be perjuring myself if I signed it. And I'd be killing my wife if I don't. He said, well, Mr. Pollard, you have a difficult decision to make right now. So what's it going to be? So I just looked at her, slumped over. I said, all right, I'll sign it. And her name was forged. They saw it. So, betrayal. After my sentencing, I was put in a very special prison, which I had no idea existed, out in the middle of nowhere. And it was a house, this cottage, surrounded by a triple fence, barbed wire, razor wire, everything. I thought, okay, it's not so bad. I got a house. I didn't realize it was the top of an elevator shaft that went down 150 meters. And my cell was 3 square meters. And you can walk that off and figure out how small it was. And the warden of the prison said to me, you've got 2 chances of, getting out of this coffin cell, as they're called. The hook over the door. You hang yourself, do whatever. Or you can talk. Otherwise, you'll come out of here an old man in a body bag. And I said, well, I don't know why I said this, but I looked at him and I said, I'm not so sure about that. God runs the world, not you. It shocked me when I said it, but it was the beginning of my turn into something I should have been, a believing Jew. So he looked at me and smiled and he said, okay, tough guy, we'll see. So I never left the cell. The food, I don't know what it was. I threw up the first time I ate it. I hope it was dog food. That would have been sterilized. There were 31 other men down there. Nobody was talking.
Nobody spoke to each other?
No, we couldn't. We were the walls were, I guess, over a meter thick and,
Did you ever see anybody else?
No, I saw hands come in with the food. That was about it. Didn't take a shower, didn't do anything. So one day, the door opened. Well, actually, what happened was when I sat down on this little tiny plank that was the bed, concrete, I had my first talk with God. And I said, I haven't talked to you ever, but I figured that this is the right time to talk to you. God has a sense of humor. So I said, look, I haven't been a very good Jew. I haven't been an observant Jew my whole life. I haven't eaten pork. I mentioned a couple of things that I thought would stand me in good stead. And I said, here's the deal. if I stopped doing these 10 things, bad things, and then I thought for a second, and then it went down to 8, then 6, then 5. Okay, if I don't do these 5 bad things and I start doing these 5 good things, save me. And that was it. I had nothing to read, nothing to write, no radio, no TV, no visits, no phone calls, nothing.
For how long?
So one day the door opened and he said, come. So come. So
favor. Sorry.
You know,
Can you pass me the napkins next to the tissue? Or next to you. Thank you. Sorry. Sorry for interrupting.
So I walked out, kind of looked around, and I said, what year is it? And it was 7 years later.
Are you kidding? Holy crap.
Yeah. Wow. I was kind of surprised. And I said, are my parents alive? Because they were very poorly at the time. When I went in, and the guy said, yeah, they're alive. And that was the first time I said Baruch Hashem. Never said it before. And I looked down the hall, and all the doors were open. So I said, what happened to them? And he said, they all committed suicide. So I said, I'm the lone survivor. And he said, yeah. That was the second time I said Baruch Hashem. So at that point, the elevator took us up very slowly. It was like being born again.
Wait a second. What do you think saved you? What do you think kept you alive for 7 years by yourself?
Well, first of all, I'm a pretty stubborn guy. Very stubborn. And I didn't want the Goyim to have a Jew either talk or kill themselves, which I consider to be, under most circumstances, an act of cowardice. Under most circumstances. There's some circumstances where you have to kill yourself to keep information from falling into the hands of the enemy. Or if you're married to a really bad woman, then, but thank God I never had to confront that situation. I don't know whether it would have been homicide or suicide at that point. I have no idea. I can't trust myself. So at any rate, kept me alive. God kept me alive.
What did you do all day long?
Oh, my day was very structured.
Really?
In the morning, I did a lot of creative work. I'm an engineer, so I did a lot of creative work, which I'm now realizing in some of my business ventures, believe it or not. And in the afternoon, I did an awful lot of exercising in the cell by myself as best I could. And then at night, I kind of just drifted off into a dreamland. You have to be very careful about that dreamland because sometimes you don't come back. So you have to be very careful about where you are and what you're doing. And you go to bed. And the day, the times of the day by the meals that are brought in, breakfast, lunch, dinner. So I came up into the light. And there he is. It's the warden, the same one. He's Goliath of a man. I mean, just huge, ex-Marine. Former Marine. There are no ex-Marines. And sometimes I have a problem with time and place. This was the wrong time and the wrong place for me to look up at him. I'm shackled and say, you see, God runs the world, not you. So he responded accordingly, knocked me out. I have a tooth missing. Which I have. Don't ask me how I got that, but I got it. And when I shook myself awake. I was laughing.
I love that you're so chutzpah.
Yeah, and
I love it.
They were holding him back because he wanted to stomp the hell out of me. And I laughed. I just said, I got this guy really mad. He's really mad. He wants to kill me. Good. So, they brought me to another prison. It took 14 hours for me to get there. At one point, I just said, I gotta pee. You want to stop someplace? So they stopped someplace at a rest stop. And it's a while before they opened up the door, and I hobbled out, and there were all the hundreds of people looking. And no, I'll pee in my pants. And I got back in to the van, the bread truck. And so when I got to the next prison, the warden, I'd never heard of that one either. It was in the South, which was okay. I mean, that's where I'm from, so I'm home. The warden just looked at me and said, "Are you going to talk?" And I said, "No." He said, "Good, don't. Your time will go better." He handed me a red T-shirt. I said, "That's for condemned people." And he said, "That's all that's here, 5,000 men and nobody going home." And I'm calculating how long I'm going to live on that compound. And he said, "Do you have a knife?" I said, "Trick question." He said, "No, I'm asking you. Just, do you have a knife?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Here." And I looked at it and he said, "You know how to use this?" I said, "Yeah, I know how to use this." He said, "You'll need it today." And he was right.
Really?
Yeah, I did. And he witnessed it and told me to go back and retrieve the knife. I was standing in line for my clothes. And there's a black guy that came up behind me and put a knife in my back and whispered in my ear how many different ways he was going to chop me up. And he made a mistake. A lot of guys, they talk too much. So I left him.
You took care of him?
I did what I was trained to do. Yeah. You sweep, pull, and stab right in the heart. And that was the end of it. You learn these things to be a second nature. You never forget them. So I went back to retrieve the knife, and it didn't have like a vacuum line on it. So I had to put my foot on the guy and really yank hard. And then as I'm wiping the blood off the guy, I looked around and everybody's watching me. And I remembered a line from a movie that none of these guys had seen because, there were no movies here. And I just looked around and I smiled and I said,
Who's next?
I'm not in here with you. You're in here with me. You all have a nice time. And so I'm mental. So they put me in with the military guys, which was great. My roommate was a Noahide, Delta Force. Innocent. Completely innocent. And everybody knew it. He had been abandoned by the Army also. He betrayed his wife with her best friend, who informed the wife. Bomb went off with his fingerprints on it. 3 people dead, got 3 consecutive natural life sentences. And I said, where were you? He said, Nicaragua. I said, why didn't the Army? He was an assassin. Why didn't the Army vouch for you? He said it was a classified operation. He said, so I know you better than you can imagine. I know exactly how you feel. And he had been in almost 30 years already. And I'm still paying for his lawyer to get him out.
Really?
Yeah. He's an innocent man. He's an innocent man. The judge even said so. There were some very funny moments in prison. One involved Esther, which I'll tell you about.
Were you allowed to see her? Did she come visit?
Yeah, I mean, we were in a visiting room. I couldn't touch her. Well, there was a kiss, a restrained kiss at the beginning, and then a restrained kiss at the end. No touching. If you touched, you got a billy club across the head, and it wasn't a rubber truncheon either. So, you're in with hundreds and hundreds of people in this thing. So one day there's a snowstorm. We're up in the mountains, it's cold. Closed everything down, and the captain came to see me, and he said, you won't believe this, but your wife is here. She walked 10 kilometers in the snow to get here. He said, my wife would kill me if I refused to let her see you. I said, okay, great, thank you. So we're sitting there, and I had my arm around her. The officer was sleeping. I knew the cameras were off because it had been frozen out, whatever. And we're watching, the snow come down, and it's nice. It's civilized. And so I looked over, and he's sleeping. So I walked over to him, and I woke him up, and I said, you want to make $1,000? And he, like, his eyes opened up. I said, just leave. Just give me 20 minutes. Just lock the door. I said, I know the cameras are off. Just stand outside the door. Just 20 minutes, even 10. Just give me a chance, please. And he looked at Esther, and he looked at me, and he looked at her again. He said, I'd like to for free. I'd like to let you do this for free. But he said, if she has a kid, I lose my job, because this is the only opportunity you would have had. No, fire me. He said, I'm sorry. I said, no, it's all right. Thank you. Thank you. So I went back and sat down next to her, and she just kind of looked at me and said, what was that all about? I said, I asked him to give us some privacy for 20 minutes. And she said, and? I said, well, I offered him $1,000, but he wouldn't take it. And she hit me really hard in my shoulder, as hard as she could. I mean, she was off her seat. She hit me. And I said, well, what did you do that for? She said, that's all I'm worth. And I said, that's all the money I have in the world. I work, this horrible job here. This is after like 10 years, $1,000. That's all. I worked for like 2 cents an hour. The Haitians making, T-shirts got more money an hour than I got. So that was pretty funny. The other funny thing that happened with her was when we got married, I asked for permission to get married. And they said, talk. Came out of Washington. You talk, you can get married. And I said, the warden was very sympathetic to me. He said, it's out of my hands, he said. So when I meet a brick wall, I don't go through it, I go around it. So I had a friend of mine who was a rabbi come on a pastoral visit with a witness, and he had a little tiny ketubah, which I signed surreptitiously, a little cup of wine, which we drank surreptitiously. It was glass. I broke it under my heel. The chuppah was the sky. And she walked around me 7 times. So the captain called me up to the observation desk, and he said, this is the South. He said, what's your girl doing walking around you this way? Is she putting a spell on this place? I mean, they're very superstitious down there. So I said, no, she has gas. He said, you all right? He said, you got a real winner there for a girlfriend. Go ahead. So I sat down, and Esther, as was her wont, looked at me and said, what was that all about? I remember that. About. What was that all about? And I told her, and she just put her hands over her face, and she said, my God, this might be the shortest marriage on record. She said, you're a trained spy. Couldn't you come up with something else? I said, no, it satisfied the situation. So those were 2 of the more.
What was your worst moment? Can you say?
Though, yeah, I don't have to think about it. I got an emergency call from her, and she told me she had breast cancer. And I knew it was over. I didn't know when or how long. So I asked the Israeli government if they could give me a compassionate arrangement to be with her during her surgery. And they tried, and no. They didn't even say talk.
You had a communication with the Israeli government while you were frozen?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. It was just an experience of being fed a bunch of hogwash and lies. There was another occasion where my mother was dying, and they wouldn't let me go see her. And Ambassador Michael Oren, the Shagrir, tried really hard he personally vouched for my good faith, that I wouldn't try to escape or anything. And they said, no. In this case, they said, if he talks, we'll consider it. No, I didn't. So my warden at the time said, look, you don't have any writing privileges, but I'm going to, at the cost of my career, I'm going to give you writing privileges, but it's got to go through Washington, but you write to your mom. So what does a son write to a dying mother? I wrote what I was supposed to write for about a month, and then she died. And then a couple of weeks later, I was called in, and he said, have a seat. I sat down. He said, how are you feeling? I said, how the F do you think I feel? He said, are you stable right now? I said, yeah. He said, do you have a knife? I said, yeah. He said, just put it on the table. I'll give it back to you. I put it close to him, and I sat down, and he pulled out the bag of letters. He had never been delivered, and they had all been shredded. So I didn't even have that.
Why?
I looked at him and I said, why did they do that? He said, I don't know. He said, he said, it's the meanest thing I ever saw in my life. Why do you do that to somebody?
Your whole treatment from beginning to end, like, okay, you did something wrong and you were willing to pay the price for it.
Well, the thing was, all of them in the prison knew what my indictment said. My indictment actually says that as a naval intelligence officer, I, without authorization, transmitted highly classified intelligence to a major non-NATO ally, parenthesis, Israel, without intent to harm the United States. They all knew that. So I got a break from them, from everybody I knew in the prison system.
History.
So why did they do that? There isn't a Soviet agent that I know of, or an enemy agent, any kind of enemy agent that I know of that went through that. Now, Al Qaeda is a different story. At Guantanamo, the waterboarding and all of that. And that's a different situation. But with me, I'm an allied agent. Now, if I had been tried under the Uniform Code of Military Justice as an officer, I could only have gotten 5 years.
Right.
That's it. But my service disappeared, and I became a civilian. And in civilian court, I could receive up to and including life without parole, which is what I got. The interesting thing was that I was never fined. I could have had a multi-million-dollar fine, but the judge, who was no friend of mine, said, I'm not going to fine you because I know you're a bona fide agent. So at the end, he said, look, I have two choices. I can give you a life sentence without parole. You'll die in prison. Or I can charge you as a mercenary as per your plea agreement, and you'll be out maybe in 10 or 15 years. He said, I'm pretty sure I know who and what you are, so I'm going to give you a life sentence without parole. And nobody understood why I said this at the end, but I thanked him. They all thought I had lost the moment. But it's important to go to prison for the right reason. And
I thought it was Caspar Weinberger who had some kind of influence on your sentence.
He, along with Aldrich James, wrote a memorandum.
Right.
And I saw it before it was classified. And there's been a vetted document that came out that scared a lot of people because it was just hogwash. It was bullshit. Many years later, a congressman, I won't mention the name, I have to protect him, a congressman actually deposed the actual author of that document, who was a colleague of mine.
Oh, really?
Under oath.
Oh, wow.
And I saw the document. I mean, it's all in the open. That is the deposition was in the open. And the congressman said the Secretary of Defense indicated that Mr. Pollard was the worst spy ever in American history. And how do you square that with reality? And he said, it was a lie. We knew it was a lie. He said, well, what about the fact that Pollard has allegedly a photographic mind, which means he should be kept in jail forever? See, that was a total lie.
Do you have a photographic memory?
Me, I remember my wife's birthday and our date of marriage. Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully. No, I don't. I mean, I have a photographic memory in the sense of that I can remember pictures. I mean, I can remember a lot of things about pictures, details about pictures that might go unnoticed by most people. But I was trained to do that because I might just get a quick glance at something and I'd have to take everything in and then subsequently reassemble in my head what I saw. It's like a snapshot. And there were many other questions that he asked, like, did he allegedly spied for other countries? He said, no. He said, look, Pollard was the naval intelligence liaison officers with a lot of our NATO allies. And so it came as part of the territory. He never divulged any information he shouldn't have. Everything was checked and double checked. So that was a lie. And he said, yeah, that was a lie also. And it just went on and on and on. The whole thing was. So even Caspar Weinberger, at the end of his life, he wrote a memoir. And Ed Black, who is he's a real gift to the Jewish people as a historian. He wrote IBM and the Holocaust, and just every book he's written has been gold. Gold. Interviewed Weinberger about his book and asked him point blank for the New York Times, why is it that Pollard isn't mentioned in your memoirs? And he answered, well, it was a minor matter made more important than it was. So Ed wasn't going to let that go. And Weinberger just kind of amplified on the insignificance of my case. So Ed asked, like, well, why did he get the sentence he did? He said, well, it was, political, okay, we're sending a message. He died then. And, we have this this is a newspaper of record. Okay. So we went to the Justice Department to ask that the sentence be revoked and that I should be taken in front of another judge and sentenced. And the Department of Justice, the Ethics Department, said that it was water under the bridge.
You said that when you were charged, if I'm not mistaken, that you were charged, how did you put it? That you weren't, you didn't have any intent.
Without intent to harm the United States.
Now, I've seen recently, there's this reel on Instagram going around of Tucker Carlson.
Oh.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Where he says that the information you provided the Israelis was detrimental to the United States.
Yeah, well,
because it was given to
the
Russia.
Russians. Yeah,
right.
Okay, this was something that, it's open, that Weinberger alleged in his memorandum, but it was not in the court record.
Can you confirm or deny
that
the information was given to Russia?
No, nothing was lost. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I can quote George Tenet, the former head of the CIA, who was definitely no friend of mine and no friend of Israel or the Jewish people. And he is on the record saying that absolutely no information that I provided Israel was lost to a third party. All the information I gave should have been gone to Israel, should have been transferred to Israel under the terms of the U.S.-Israel Intelligence Exchange Agreement. I was very careful about that. At one point, Rafi asked me for the names of all the American agents in Israel, and I refused. I said,
"Oh, really?"
Yeah, I refused. And he said, one of them is going to kill you. And it's true. One of them was the one that ratted on me. Russian Jew, friend of Arik Sharon's, on the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. How did I find out about that? He sued the CIA for inadequate retirement, and he put as one of his achievements exposing me. Well, the judge in the case confirmed the accuracy of his allegations, but said that the determination of his retirement should be done behind closed doors. Next thing I know, he's here in Israel, on Kol Yisrael, bragging about what he did to me. And the interviewer was horrified, saying, you compromised our agent? Yes.
Why?
And it just didn't care. It was a job. He didn't paid. Esther heard it and ran immediately to the Shabak. And they refused to do anything. We don't want to do anything to this guy because it'll upset the Americans. She said, arrest him and trade him. No. Look, we found out later, Esther was sitting at our dinner table when Mossad came to see us here in Israel. And I had to sign a document or countersign a document that I never talked under interrogation. Well, they knew that because they already signed it, but they knew everything that had happened to me. And Esther had never heard of this before. I have a lot of wounds on my body from interrogation, and I just never bothered to tell her how I got them. And she said, how do you know all these things of what they did to him? And they said, oh, we signed off on that. She said, you knew? And I said, yeah. We knew he wouldn't talk, and we didn't really care about him. He's from Lakam. He's not Mossad. And she was crying. And the document was on the table. So I said to them, can I show you our garden? And they said, yeah, sure. And I looked at her and I said, photograph it. So I took them outside, took her phone, photographed it. What did I want in exchange? I wanted a statement, sworn statement, that they would never do that to an agent again. And Esther argued with me. She said, it's words on paper. I said, it's important for me. That's all. What are they going to do? Give me back the pain and suffering, the time, the money? What money could do? What is the money for me? It's nothing. They ripped me to pieces. I have 100% disability. I can't squat. I can't do a range of things. So I said, I just want them to swear they'll never do it again. Look, right now, I'm under the protection of the Shabak.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't feel safe? Are you not safe?
No, because the PA...
Am I safe here with you in the house? Is someone going to come after us, Jonathan?
I'm a married man.
No, I mean, that's not what I mean.
I'm a loyal married man to a British girl who's got one hell of a sense of... I know, you should be very afraid.
Even though she's
afraid of her. No. The issue is when I came home, there was a statement from the PA that there was $1 million bounty on my head for Tunis. So when I was asked by reporters about that, I expressed surprise. I said, I think I'm worth more than that. You know, you have to joke. You just have to. You can't take anything too seriously, except your wife's birthday and your anniversary.
Can we talk a little bit about the hostages in Israel, the current situation, October 7th, the war, and your opinion of it, if things are going in the right direction, if you agree with how the government is handling it, especially in terms of the hostages, because I heard that you made a statement about how the families of the hostages should not be allowed to speak.
I've said a lot more than that.
Yeah. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Sure. I was getting ready to go to Shachrit on that Shabbat, that Black Sabbath. And my phone started ringing red, which means I have to answer it. And I was getting the GoPro feed from the Nukba terrorists. And Revka looked at me and said, "Is this some kind of sick movie or what is it?" I said, "No, it's real. This is happening now." And I thought she was going to collapse. It's stuff that a lot of people still haven't seen.
How did you get to see it?
No, because I'm
connected in some way.
Well, first of all, I have a security threat to my life. And second of all, Hamas wants me dead also for various reasons. They suffered also at my hands. So nobody forgets anything in this neck of the woods. I haven't. They haven't. So life for me changed at that point, because up until that point, I had labored under the misperception that I was the exception to my abandonment, and betrayal had been the exception to the rule. We never leave a man behind. Apparently, women are left behind, but men are not left behind. That's the lie. And I suddenly realized that no, I wasn't the outlier. I wasn't the exception. We were all abandoned and betrayed. So that's when I decided to go political. I'm not under any illusion that one man, whatever his background and qualifications, can change the situation here, but he can try. So then the issue of the hostages came up. And I have been laser focused on prioritizing the importance of destroying Hamas, depopulating Gaza, leaving nothing but an anthill as the highest structure in Gaza, and repopulating it with Jews and turning the page. Why do I have such a cold-blooded perspective on this matter? I was trained as a naval officer in a scenario of a submarine in war that's damaged and it's going down. And the captain has a choice of either losing the boat and all the men or sealing off the damaged compartment that unfortunately also has living sailors in it. But he has to sacrifice the few in order to save the many. And it's a question that we all had to answer correctly, unemotionally, in order to advance. Now, when I visited the Knesset one time, there, the hostage families there, the leftist hostage families there, and again, I'm not under any illusion as to what a lot of them are really advocating for. That is, the organizations that kind of adopted them. Shortly after, a friend of mine, Gal Hirsch, who's in charge of the hostage, took his job. I asked him, why are you taking this poison chalice? There's no good ending of this. He said, no, I have to try to do what I can. He's a good man. And I said, well, at the very least, take the families into your confidence, give them a table, give them good pastry, good coffee, and let them see everything. And Bibi said no. And I said, if you don't do this, they'll be co-opted by the left. And their natural fear and attachment to their loved ones will be co-opted by people who don't care about their kids, but are going to use it as a political weapon against the conservative government, the coalition. Okay, so I met these families, and they're yelling and screaming at me, you have cold blood, you want to shut us up, all this stuff. I listened, okay. And I said, do you know what I went through? And I gave them a lot more detail than I gave you just now, a lot more. So I said, I know what it's like to be abandoned. I know what it's like to be lied to. I know what it's like to be torn to pieces. I know what it's like to be paraded in front of cameras as a example of what will happen to people. And I said, I know what it's like to be buried alive. So I said, my statements are made with insight into what your loved ones have and are going through. I said, let me tell you a quick story. Gila Cohen, MK, her son was in Lebanon as a paratrooper, Sahi Negbi. And she was asked what would happen if he were captured back in the 70s. And she said, I'd be outside Balfour screaming and yelling for the prime minister to do whatever was necessary to get him home. But then I would go inside and quietly tell the Rosh HaMemsala, do what is good for Israel. The fact of the matter is, I screamed and yelled within certain organizations, certain channels, not to negotiate with Hamas, not to empower them. Tell them, this was on October 8th, you either give back all the hostages, including the bodies of the deceased ones, including our 2 soldiers that were being held, the bodies of our 2 soldiers being held, or else there will be nothing left in Gaza from Jabalia in the east to Rafah in the south. You have 24 hours to return all of them, or death will come to you. Period. The angel of death will come to you. And I was supported by actually 3 cabinet members. I have no problem saying who they were: Israel Katz, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and Bezalel Smotrich. The only ones.
Why didn't they do it?
Bibi.
Was it Bibi, or was it also our connection with the United States?
Okay. The issue with the United States is an excuse. It's not an explanation.
Really?
Because we elect people to make hard decisions. We elect people to defend our honor and to safeguard our national security at all costs. And in this situation, the destruction of Hamas and the invalidation of the taking of hostages have to be the principal objectives of our war right now. Why? As far as the advantage of taking hostages, what would happen if, God forbid, a show in Manhattan or in Borough Park or in Paris was taken over by terrorists? And there could be hundreds of Jews in there. And the terrorists just say, we want 100 prisoners released, murderers. Let me explain something to you. One day, Esther came to see me, surprised. They gave her a special visit. And she said, I'm here as an emissary of the cabinet. I said, what? She said, the American Secretary of State has offered to release you, Kerry, in exchange for 100 of the worst terrorists imaginable. They didn't have blood on their hands. They were drenched in blood. Our children, our grandparents, they were horrible people, animals. And she said the only hitch to this whole thing is that you would never be permitted to come home. You would die. Your body can't even come home. You're met. You're in the midbar. And the decision is up to you, whether the government will accept it or not. And I thought to myself, I have no future. I'm going to die in this place one way or the other. I mean, people are just dying right and left. And she said, before you answer, I want you to know that if you stay in prison for the rest of your life, I will stay with you. And if you decide to stay in the midbar, as a free man, I will stay with you. And that's why over her kever is the line from Tehillim, I knew you in the desert.
Where's she buried?
Har HaMenuchot.
My dad too.
Oh, no. So she said, what's your answer? And I thought to myself, well, Bibi, he may be a callous son of a bitch, but he knows me pretty well. He knew I would never agree to this. So I said, no, I won't go along with this. And she said, I need a slightly longer answer. And I said, okay, hell no. And she said, quit being a 2-year-old. And she said, I need an educated answer. So I said, okay, here's the educated answer. I can't do it for 3 reasons. Number one, it would devalue the life of the victims. 2, it would lower deterrence. And 3, it would inflict incalculable harm on the victims' families who, while they may want me out, not this way. So I said, I'll stay in prison. That's my choice.
Wow.
So she said, well, those are very good answers, but that's not the Jewish answer. She was my Morah. So I said, okay, what's the Jewish answer? And she said, in the Midbar, the Meragarim, except for 2, made the fatal mistake of valuing a continuation of their life in the Midbar over their diminished reputation in Eretz HaKodesh. And she said, we've been paying the price for that ever since. So she said, you have 2 ways of coming home as a Jew. You can either come home as an old man in a casket, as a mat to be interred in Knesset Israel, or you can come home also as an old man and kiss the ground, which is why I did that when I came home. So she said, those are the only 2 ways you can come home as a Jew. I said, okay, you can put my name on that. And Bibi apparently was quite relieved when I said no. So I know, and I've told people this story of what happened to me, where I was offered a chance of getting out, except it was qualified. Now, people have asked me, well, if you could have come home as part of this deal, would you have done that? And I said, no, I wouldn't have. I spent my whole professional life hunting and locating and dispatching these animals. I'm not going to let them out. I know the numbers from the Shalit deal, including one, Yahya Sinwar, and I'm not going to contribute to that.
The cycle has to end.
The cycle has to end. And that's why originally, when we had the start of the conversation, I intimated, but it's true, that I value the lives of my fellow citizens and the safety and security of this country more than I do my own. This is how we live. Every time one of our children puts on a uniform and goes off to war, I mean, we're not sacrificing our children, in the fires of Moloch. Baruch Hashem, we have a Jewish army now that can defend us. So it's a zchut, it's an honor to see them dressed in a warrior's uniform that we haven't seen in 2,000 years. And unfortunately, we are all soldiers now. That's what Hamas has said. From our babies to our old people in wheelchairs, we're all soldiers. And that means if we're caught, we have to die a soldier's death. I mean, that's the only choice we've been given. You do not negotiate with terrorists. This hand has never shaken a terrorist's hand. I pulled a lot of triggers on them, but I have never shaken a terrorist's hand. Okay? I've seen what they can do. I didn't have to see the GoPros. I've seen things that I can't get out of my mind. They're not nightmares. They're just cautionary tales.
How do you think this situation is going to play out? Do you think we'll ever have stability in the region?
Yes, we will. But you don't really want to know how I see that playing out.
Why?
We have multi-fronts right now, and not one of them has been shut down, including the media front, the internal front in the territories with the terrorists there, even the internal front within Israel proper with the leftists and the anarchists doing horrible things. First time in my life I was spat on was by members of a leftist demonstration outside Gaza on the where the Rosh Hashanah was, because I'm a fascist. Okay, go figure, whatever. I asked one of them when she confronted me and said, where is your pin? And I looked at her. I have a pin that says Nakama. It's just me.
Huh.
And I said, do you know who I am? And she said, yeah, I know who you are. I said, did you wear a pin for me? And she said, no, why would I? I said, thank you for your honest answer. How does this end? It ends when we realize we have a choice to live or die. Our fronts have not been shut down. Gaza, Egypt. Egypt is a front. Don't kid yourself. They're getting ready for war with us.
Yeah.
Yemen,
Jordan,
Qatar, Lebanon, Syria. I mean, these are all fronts. Turkey. I was asked this question professionally a few weeks ago when it was announced that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia had entered into a defensive agreement where Pakistan would extend their nuclear umbrella to Saudi Arabia. And now the Saudis are threatening to have this nuclear umbrella extended to Turkey and Egypt, which means we might not be able to strike first, preemptively or preventively. I see where it's going. So here's my deal. Every Friday, there are about 1 million and some change of these screaming maniacs, these religiously doped zombies in Sana'a, Yemen, having a hate fest. You know, we hit it with a neutron bomb. That's about 1 million and some change gone. That'll rip the guts out of the Houthis and will allow the internationally recognized Yemeni government in Aden to march north and finish the situation, probably with Saudi and UAE help. Okay, that's one front that's shut down. Gaza, we keep going forward. I did not want one soldier into Gaza. I laid out very carefully the type of urban warfare we should be engaged in right now. And it doesn't involve feeding our soldiers into Stalingrad on the Med. So let's just say they follow what I've suggested. There's nothing left. Did we rescue any hostages? Worst case, if we make the offer, you bring in a hostage or hostages, you'll live. In fact, we might even let you leave. But if you don't, none of you is going to live. Not one of you. We're going to hunt you down and kill all of you, wherever you are. You depopulate the place, annex the place. We don't annex it. We declare, we reestablish sovereignty, repopulate it, turn the page. That front shut down. Qatar? Well, let me explain something. We in Israel have been playing this game that we would not be, the bomb in the basement, that we would not be the first country to either declare or use nuclear weapons. Okay, well, guess what? The Saudis just did that because nobody's under any illusion that the Pakistanis are in control of these nuclear weapons. They are bought and paid for by the Saudis, which means they have control over them, which means they're a nuclear weapons state now. They're the first ones. So what should be our response to that? I've been asked this question by people who don't know what to do right now. There are a lot of them.
A lot in the government? A lot?
A lot.
Oh,
I don't look at the uniforms. I look at the person. And I said, okay, we established the fact that we have nuclear weapons by doing what we did in Sana'a, Doha, in Qatar, which is a country that's more dangerous than Iran, even with nuclear weapons would ever be. And we take Iran off the map. There's nothing left of Iran except Azerbaijan, Tabriz. because they're going to be reattached to Baku, to Azerbaijan, which is really an ally of ours. But the rest of the country, you can't get rid of knowledge. They've made that point very clear. We can bomb weapons establishments. We can bomb centrifuge places. We can bomb uranium enrichment places. We can keep bombing and bombing and bombing, but it's the knowledge they have. Well, I'm sorry. If that's the case, then the knowledge has to go away. My children, your children, our children are worth more to me than the entire Middle East. So Iran is gone, Qatar's gone, Yemen's gone, Gaza's gone. Then Hezbollah meets the same fate, as does Turkey and Egypt. I'm sorry. Their intent is clear. You have to be an idiot to let them build up their military establishments to the point where they're going to overrun us. It'll be worse than 1967 or 73. The Turks in particular, people don't understand how advanced they are in terms of military equipment. They're light years ahead of us. And people are shocked when I tell them this.
We have a truce with them now, right? We have peace with them right now.
No.
No?
No.
So why haven't they done anything?
Because they're building up. When they have a plan, which is publicly articulated. So people in the know can't say they didn't know about it. First of all, they have to build up the Syrian army again, the Salafi army, al-Jilani's army, to the point where they can be a valuable auxiliary for the Turkish army. The Turks are building up long-range missiles that are much more advanced than the Iranians have. I mean, I could go through a list of things that they're NATO trained, their soldiers are professional. It would be a bloodbath in Syria.
Who are you advising now? Who are you giving this information to? Anyone who actually has an opportunity to make a change?
Yeah.
And they're listening to you?
And they say I'm an alarmist. Look, before October 7th, I was asked to do an evaluation of what was going on down south. Okay. So what I did was I did what I was trained to do. I kind of drew a chart, and on one side, all of the things that were happening in Israel in the anti-judicial reform movement to call into question not only the willingness but the ability of our army to fight. And then coded to or corresponding to the date of the story, what Hamas said, what Hezbollah said, and what Iran said. And after a month, my conclusion drew a line under it, and my conclusion was war is coming.
So you weren't surprised?
No, they're laboring under a misperception that we can't fight, we won't fight. And because of that misperception that we're going to have a war. And then I actually went south, and I saw the rioting on the fence line by peaceful civilians, and they're blowing holes in the fence. So I marked those on a map. And then I had heard and saw a video of 4 or 5 separate incidents of civilians, Hamasniks in civilian clothes, cutting through the entire fence line, and just standing there looking at their watches, waiting for a response. And in no instance, in no situation, was there a response. They got bored and walked back into Gaza. And I said, oh, no. And I marked on the map where they could come across. I mean, they had weakened the fence. They had broken through at one point. They saw there was no reaction. And the last part of the puzzle was a video I saw a week before. It was in the beginning of October. There was a huge military parade in Khan Yunis. And I looked at this video, which was not generally shown. And I said, where did they get this equipment? This isn't on anything that I've been given to evaluate. I mean, this stuff is dangerous. And at the end of the video, there was smoke. And then there was an Arabic expression that came into focus. I knew what it said. And then there was the English version, and it said soon. And I said, when I gave the briefing, I said, we're on a short timeline. Mobilize.
If Israel knew this, then why didn't we prevent it?
Because I was called an alarmist by Chetzi Alevi.
Do you know that my son was serving in Kisufim the year before, from July till September. He wasn't there, thankfully, on October 7th, but the army took us on a tour. And they took us into tunnels underneath Kisufim. And I say to myself, holy crap. Like, if we would have been there a month, 2 months later, we would have been gone. Didn't they know this? The army know this?
If you were lucky, you would have been gone.
Yeah. Where there's a disconnect between what everybody...
That's what's called the misconception. That's a polite way of saying that they fooled themselves, okay? They tricked themselves. There's another problem in that we have a general staff which was brought up with poison, which was the tahar neshek, the purity of arms. And this is a surefire way of guaranteeing that you're going to be on the back foot when it hits the fan. I was stopped by a bus full of young recruits that were off to the front. This was a little while ago. And they were around me, and there were about 50 of them. And they were saying, what is it like, to have people shooting at you? What is it like, to be scared? What is it like? I said, first of all, you're never scared. And they just looked at me. I said, because you're fighting Al Kiddush Hashem. So whatever happens to you, you're going straight. I have to tell them that. You're going straight to Shamayim. So stop being scared. I said, here, I'll do the best thing I can for you. Do you have your little pamphlets? Yes. I said, give them to me. So they all gave them the pamphlets, and I threw them away. I said, I'm going to tell you what my father, who was an ex-cavalry officer from 1932, before he became a doctor, a veterinarian and then a doctor, told me before I thought I was going off to Vietnam. He said, to whom do you owe your loyalty? I'm looking at a general. So I said, the Constitution, because that's what you swear to defend. He said, no. The flag? No. Congress? No. The president? No. My commanding officer. And my father just said, oh, hell no. I said, okay, who do I owe my loyalty to then? He said, to the man on either side of you. You must never do anything that will compromise their safety and security, even if it means you violate an order. Because if you get an order like that, it is an unlawful order. He said, I'll be proud to visit you in prison. He never thought about what would happen to me eventually. But he said, I will be proud to visit you in prison for disobeying such an order to betray the men, and for us, the men and women on either side of you.
I think this is a really good time for me to ask you my last question. If you could do the whole thing over again, what would you do it?
I hope I do it better. I'm sorry for not having been more effective. When I saw the missiles, Iraqi missiles hit Israel, it was one of the lowest points in my life, because that's what my mission was intended to prevent. And there we had been backed down by the Americans, not to preempt or retaliate against the missile barrage during the Gulf War. And I just said, what did I sacrifice myself for? And this is, again, in conclusion, why I'm running right now. I'm scared. And I don't scare very easily. My wife accuses me of having ice water in my veins. I've already had one situation with a daughter. I thought she was going to get kidnapped by Arabs. And only time in Israel I drew my gun. And the guy just looked at me. He was going for my daughter. He didn't see me, or it was late at night. And I just looked at him I was very calm, and I just said, please, let me pull the trigger. Please. He understood English, got back in the car and left. To my shock, there were 4 religious Jewish policemen in back of me who didn't do anything because they were off duty. A beautiful little girl. I never would have seen her again. Okay. So would I do it again? Yes. Absolutely, because the survival of this country and the safety and welfare of its people are more important to me than my own life. I mean, that's just how we have to live in this neighborhood. How many of our soldiers have jumped on grenades saying Shema Yisrael? It's the same logic. And frankly, how many of our people during the height of the bus bombings during the Intifada went ahead and got on the buses, knowing that could be the end of them? Because we are, by nature, a nation of heroes. We are. But we need a government that is worthy of us, our people. And we don't have one right now. We just don't. Left, right, and center. I was asked by a dear friend of mine, Judith Segaloff, who did an interview on a podcast on the Jerusalem Post podcast. Is there anybody in the government right now that I could, serve with or whatever? And, I said Israel Katz. I know him well enough that when Bibi's out of the picture, he'll do the right thing. There are people, yes, like Itamar Ben-Gvir, yes, people like Bezalel Smotrich, and many people within those parties. There are people within the Likud, Boaz Bismuth, Danny Luz, Amit Halevi, God bless him, Moshe Sada. There are a bunch of good Chevre Knesset. Even on the left, there are good people, but they have never been given the opportunity to assume leadership, not just by the party bigwigs, but by the press as well. They vet who we vote for. And it's insane. Somebody asked me just yesterday, you're never going to get any coverage in the mainstream. And I said, Baruch Hashem, I don't want coverage by them. I'll talk to the people through podcasts such as this one and others. And
Well, I'll support you.
That's fine. My 13-year-old alerted me to the fact that she will do YouTube videos, dancing videos, to support me. I said, keep your clothes on, girl. Keep your clothes on. So
I want to thank you so much for coming here and sharing your story and being so open with me. It means a lot to me that you came. And thank you for what this sounds so silly to say, it's only words, but I want to thank you for what you did for Am Yisrael, that you put your life on the line, you sacrificed your life for us. And you're going to go down in the history books as one of the Giburim of our generation.
Esther was the one who deserves the praise. I just had to survive. She had to go out and fight for me.
Her neshama should happen, Aliyah.
And I'm thankful that I'm able to meet the daughter of a man that I had such high respect for, but never had the privilege of meeting. So this is a good meeting.
Yeah.
And I appreciate this.
Yeah, it was very meaningful to me too.
The Toronto Zionist Board.
Yeah.
Nachon, correct?
Zionist Federation.
TZF. That's right.
Yeah.
I'll never forget them,
He thought about you day and night. I'm going to show you afterwards an email that my mother wrote. It was his hesped. That he had a dream one night about Ilan Ramon's father and Daniel Pearl's father getting together to sign a petition to free you. And he was sitting at the computer a few weeks later, my mom told me, and he was writing I'm a Jew. My mother is a Jew. And the phone rang, and it was Daniel Pearl's father on the phone.
Oh, wow. There are no coincidences, by the way, in our history, in our lives as Jews. There are no coincidences.
No. No. So he would have been so happy to see us sitting here together. And I'm sure that if he was around now, he would support you in the government as well. He would.
I have no doubt. But you have a very illustrious lineage, and from what I've seen, you're living up to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. I wish you so much success in the future, and I'm happy you're
Wish
here.
me the ability to deal with teenage girls, and I will be very, very happy.
I'm sure
because I'm just too old for this, right?
How old are you now?
How old do I look? I'm 71.
Oh, okay. Okay. You look great.
I've been, as we say in Texas, I've been rode hard and put up wet. I mean, I've been busted up pretty badly. And
you look terrific for someone who's been busted up.
Appearances can be deceiving, but I tell people, you marry a young girl and she'll keep you alive.
Yeah, she keeps you in
I married a young girl, or actually, as I think you know or may not know, but Esther did the shidduch.
Really? No, I didn't know.
Yeah, she did the shidduch.
Wow.
And I asked her, like, what are you doing? And she said, I'm not going to make it, and I want you to be happy. And I am.
You are?
Very happy. But I just never saw myself as being the stepfather of 6 girls. I mean, what is the problem with moving a bottle of perfume? What is the problem for wearing a sister's skirt? What is the problem? Okay, these are like declarations of war. And I just don't know what to do. I'm just, Rivka, my wife, laughs at me because I feel I have to solve problems.
Yeah.
And she said, you can't solve these. These are what girls have to just kind of work out for themselves.
Do you feel like they're your own children?
Sometimes no. Sometimes I think they're Nukba terrorists. But I'm very concerned for them. I would do anything to safeguard them. At my age, they may be the closest thing to children I have. I'm not saying my wife and I are giving up on that. She's a young one.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I wish you would.
Thank you. If God blesses us, then fine. I certainly will continue trying. I'm not about to give up on that task.
I want you to have children. Well, you deserve it.
A friend of mine, a rather elderly lady, after Esther died, had a conversation with me, and she said, "You need to have a baby." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "For revenge." And I said, "You don't have a baby for revenge. You have a baby out of love." I said, "Are you offering?" And she said, "What do you see in me? I'm a really old woman." I said, "I see a couple $1 billion there." So everybody started laughing.
You need to continue your lineage. We need to have more like you in the next generation.
No, I want a little girl, actually. I want a little girl just like my wife. I'll be very happy. Boys are problematic. Girls you can be really protective of and they don't get angry with you. Boys, they want to just be independent and do stupid things. I know, having been one, I know what boys can do. They're really stupid. But girls, no, this is why fathers cry at weddings. And with their boys, they just say, "Oh, thank God, somebody else's problem right now." So thank you again for this opportunity.
My absolute pleasure. You're always welcome. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. I'm Yisrael Chai. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Dana Show. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to the podcast, like and share with your friends on social media, and rate us 5 stars. Don't forget to tune in next week, and we'll see you then.